But Huxley had no hesitation in saying that black people were clearly and obviously inferior to white people. In other words, somebody in the vanguard of liberal progressive opinion in the mid-19th century would have been regarded as a terrible right-wing reactionary if he were alive in our time. My point is this, that morals and ethics are labelled as of their time. It has nothing to do with religion. We get our morals from the fact that we live in the 21st century, or in the 1950s, or in the 1900s, wherever a person happens to be born. It's that gives him or her the morals of the time, give or take a little bit of difference between individuals. We don't need religion to give us our morals. We shouldn't get our morals from religion. As a matter of fact, we don't. We even have evidence on this from opinion polls, and this is rather in my head at the moment, because quite recently the British branch of the Richard Dawkins Foundation, which is legally quite independent of the American branch, conducted an opinion poll of the British people. And the reason we did this is that every 10 years there's a national census in Britain, and it's been the custom for the census to ask people to tick a box, the religion box, Christian, Jew, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, etc., or no religion. In 2001, the census showed that 72% of the British people recorded themselves as Christian. That figure of 72% has been used during the intervening 10 years by politicians, by priests, by bishops, to argue that Britain is a Christian country and therefore should abide by Christian values and Christian morals, which often means biblical. We in the British Richard Dawkins Foundation doubted that this was a valid thing to do. We joined other groups in trying to get the religion question removed from the 2011 census. We failed on that. The religion question was in there. So we fell back on Plan B, which was to commission an opinion poll from a reputable polling organisation in the very week after the census. So we were really sampling at the same time as the census. And we particularly wanted to know the deeper opinions and beliefs of the people who ticked the Christian box in the census. So our first question was, did you tick the Christian box? And the answer to that was, the actual results of the census have not yet been published, but our opinion poll indicates that the number ticking the Christian box has dropped in the 10 years since 2001, has dropped from 72% to 54%. So that's a good result. We then took that 54%, the people who tick the Christian box, and asked them supplementary questions to see what they really believed, in particular, what was their attitude to morality. By the way, it turned out that the 54% are not, the majority of them are not really what you might call Christian. They don't go to church, they don't read the Bible, they don't know what the first book of the New Testament even is. And when we asked them, why did you tick the Christian box? We offered them a choice. Is it because you believe that Jesus is your Lord and Saviour? Is it because you believe the teachings of Jesus and so on? The most popular answer to why did you tick the Christian box was, well, I like to think of myself as a good person. Let that sink in a bit. That's a reason for saying that you're a Christian. It's an insult not only to atheists, but to Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus, etc. as well. Then we asked another question of these people. Again, remember that, the 54% who tick the Christian box. We asked them, when you face a moral dilemma, when you face a question of right and wrong, do you turn to your religion? And only 10% said yes. So as a matter of fact, they don't turn to their religion, even if they call themselves Christian. 10% of the 54%, note, not 10% of the British population, 10% of the 54% who, probably in most cases mistakenly, call themselves Christian. The most popular answer to when you face a moral dilemma, which way do you turn, was, I turn to my innate sense of right and wrong, which of course is what we all do. So we don't turn to religion for right and wrong, and we shouldn't. What should we do? Well, intelligently designing morals is what moral philosophers do. And I put up a distinction there between absolutist moral philosophers, who are mostly religious, and consequentialist moral philosophers, who believe that what is wrong is what does harm, damage, causes suffering. An absolutist, mostly religious people, will say, it's just wrong, end of story, no argument, no need to justify it, it's just plain wrong. For example, in the case of abortion, an absolutist will say, abortion is wrong, abortion is murder, if you kill an embryo, it's equivalent to murdering a person, so we go and shoot some doctors who do abortions. The consequentialist, instead, would say, does the embryo suffer? Who suffers when an abortion is done? Who suffers when an abortion is not done? Is the sum total of human happiness increased or decreased, given the situation that a woman may find herself in? Does the embryo suffer? Well, the early embryo that I put up there, which would be something like an 8 or 16 cell embryo, of course it doesn't suffer. It's got no nervous system. It doesn't suffer any more than a lettuce or a potato would eat it. You might have more misgivings about a later fetus. Does a later embryo suffer? Well, it's possible, because by then it's got a nervous system, and you certainly need a nervous system in order to suffer. But however much it may suffer, it surely suffers a lot less than a pig or a lamb or a cow when you slaughter it and raise it in a factory farm. And eat it for meat. So absolutist morality, which is not intelligently designed, says abortion is murder, end of story. They worry a lot about a thing they call personhood. When does personhood begin? And they will say personhood begins at conception. That would be the Roman Catholic doctrine, for example. And next time somebody tells you that, go and find some identical twins, or I put up some identical triplets there. Identical twins or identical triplets split after conception. Which twin got the soul? Which triplet got the personhood, as opposed to being presumably some kind of zombie? Euthanasia or assisted suicide of the mortally ill who suffer and have no further interest in life. Absolutist morality simply asserts that killing humans is wrong, end of story. Intelligently designed morality asks whether suffering is decreased. But intelligently designed morality is also mindful of possible risks, slippery slopes. What if the very ill person doesn't really want to die, but is pushed into it by relatives, greedy to inherit wealth? Those are questions which a consequentialist and an intelligently designed moralist would have to consider, but having considered them, might put in place adequate safeguards to stop it being abused. There's a rather good argument that says that assisted suicide might actually might actually prolong life in a paradoxical way. If a very unhappy person, or a person who fears that they are going to become very unhappy when they get a bit older, they know that when they get older they will be incapable, physically incapable of committing suicide. And if they know that they cannot get help when they reach the point where they would like to die, they may take the step now while they still have their faculties and their powers to kill themselves. thereby in fact shortening their life when they might have had another 5 years, another 10 years of perhaps quite happy life, because they're afraid of going past the point of no return when they'll no longer be able to do it. And somebody close to me has actually been in that position and done it. Stem cell cloning, the so-called moral objection to that is purely based upon the fact that embryos, actually very, very early embryos, long before they develop a nervous system and can suffer pain, are involved. Another possible objection is that it opens up a slippery slope to reproductive cloning, and absolutist moralists have a horror of actually cloning a whole human being like Dolly the lamb. And so, once again, they don't give reason, they don't have to give reasons, they just more or less say yuck. Cloning is horrible, is reprehensible, is playing God, is the phrase they often use. Intelligently designed morality might object to whole organism cloning, perhaps on slippery slope grounds, perhaps on grounds of suffering of the first clone. The first clone baby might be subject to merciless hounding by the tabloid press, the National Enquirer, or the British equivalents, which are even worse. And there's also the suspicion, which is similar to the one we saw in the case of the identical twins. There are people who don't understand what cloning means, and they believe that a cloned human being would have no soul, would have no personhood, and we've already seen the objection to that. Identical twins are just clones. Might we one day intelligently design ourselves or design our children? We already sort of design our children when we educate them and decide on the kind of education we want for them. Somebody who wants their child to be a budding Mozart might well force the child to have music lessons, whether the child wants it or not. Well, that is a kind of intelligent design of your child, and it's not one that most people object to. What people do object to is, of course, intelligent design of the genome of your child, designer babies. Most sensible people have no problem with negative eugenics. For example, when there's a risk, a known risk of a terrible genetic disease like Huntington's chorea, if, like Woody Guthrie, you have Huntington's chorea, this is a dominant gene, it's fatal, it's lethal, and sometime in middle age, any child of Woody Guthrie would have known that he had a 50% chance of inheriting this dominant gene, and it would kill him. Well, we can do something about that. We can intelligently design babies so that they don't have Huntington's chorea. And if an adult who has Huntington's chorea wishes to have a baby, what they can do is do it by IVF, and then at a very early stage, take one sample cell from the embryo. One sample cell is enough to look at its DNA, and when you do IVF, you take quite a number of eggs from the woman and fertilize them all. So roughly half the eggs that you take from a woman will have the lethal gene, and the other half won't. So you simply choose one that doesn't have the lethal gene to implant back into the woman, and you've cleaned out Huntington's chorea or haemophilia, whatever it might be, in a single generation. That kind of negative eugenics, it seems very hard to object to, yet you'll find absolutist moralists who certainly would object. Positive eugenics is another matter. Positive eugenics meaning you're actually trying to breed for positively, trying to make brilliant musicians or brilliant mathematicians or brilliant high jumpers or brilliant sprinters or something of that sort. A lot of people object to that, and the consequentialist objections are there too. I'm not saying that it's only absolutists who object to positive eugenics, but we need to look at what the objections are. First objection is Hitler tried to do it. Well, it's not actually an objection. You have to ask, okay, Hitler did a lot of terrible things, but nevertheless we could ask whether it was, whether positive eugenics is necessarily bad. It's not bad simply because Hitler tried to do it.